Thank you to Miss Ag, our children. God bless you. Did you know, fun fact, in the spirit realm, I don't know if this applies in the physical realm. I imagine maybe it does. Well, in its own way. In the spirit realm, when you care for children, it's double the bonus hours. So in the spirit realm, at least what they tell us in Al Solar, you work like your hourly bonus hours, right? But when you care for children, it's double. It's like double time. So imagine how important it is taking care of children. It's a huge responsibility. Oh, and I digress. Speaking of responsibilities, one of the best blessings that we can claim in our lives is that we have agency over ourselves. Meaning, we have the power to create and build whatever we want for our lives. It's a great reminder, as we talk today, a toolbox for healing and victory. It's a fantastic reminder that we have this choice. And today we're going to talk about this. And probably during our moments of research and reading, probably one of the most beautiful things that we came across was a validation of something a friend had shared with us many years ago, is that it's possible to hold space with pain and suffering in your life and to be able to choose joy at the same time. Often we think, well, if I'm sad or if I'm suffering, that's the extent of what I can feel. I can't feel any other emotions other than other bad ones. But it is entirely possible, and Joanna encourages us and tells us and reminds us that joy, slightly different from happiness, is a choice that we can make. And who doesn't want to have healing or victory? I mean, put your hand up if you don't want healing or victory. Nobody's going to put their hand up. So let's dive in, guys. Let us dive in. Well, let us first and foremost set the foundation of who and what we are. Mind, body, and spirit. For all intents and purposes, we'll say that. We're not going to go into any of the different levels of the paraspirit and all that stuff. But to set a foundation for today, we know that the body, and this is from the Spirit's book, the body is only the envelope. The soul is the essential being, the primary cause, the principle of all things. If we see an effect, we must conclude there is a cause. If the effect is intelligent, the cause must be intelligent. So we are not this body. We are, and there's that saying that we are a spirit having a human experience in this body. And what is interesting is there's a plethora of struggles as a humanity we can have. And we're going to point out some historical points very briefly. We're going to go over them. I'm not going to dive crazy into these points. But throughout history, this idea of sadness, of not having a fulfilled life, it has existed. The old term was melancholy back in the day in ancient Greek. And it had a lot to do with, back then they believed that the body and the health of your body had to do with the four humors, one of them being the black bile. And basically, if you were overly sad in ancient times, it's because you had too much of this black bile, and that's what it was. Up until, not too many centuries ago, that was the understanding of it. And then fast forward, we come to understanding what medical science, or the DSM-V, the Diagnostical and Statistical Manual came out in the 50s with the actual clinical diagnosis of depression, which we're going to talk about very briefly. And let us be mindful that anyone can be depressed. It's an emotion, and it can be temporary like any other emotion, but we are going to differentiate between clinical status and just the passing feeling. So just going through the different understandings of the 19th and 20th centuries, nobody really uses the word melancholy unless you're reading from poetry, like the greats, like William Butler Yeats, or of that category. You don't really hear this term anymore. So we have where it's derived from the Latin deprimere, to press down. There's the medical modernization, and then the formal standardization, like I said, in the DSM. Well, just a reminder, like we said, this depression is a broad term. Okay, like there is the difference between the clinical, when you are physiologically, you're unable. In the DSM, it's generally, they say, for more than 2 weeks, this episode persists. But for all intents and purposes today, this talk covers any negative emotion, whether it has reached the level of the clinical pathology or it's a passing one. This toolbox will serve as a purpose for any and all things. That's why it's a toolbox. You can open it up, and we actually planned to bring a toolbox when we thought that that's just too much. And actually, the toolbox is really heavy. But for all intents and purposes, this is sort of a catch-all for all things. Then there is that data that's out there, and yes, depression of itself, the clinical depression has risen over the last 10 years, has doubled in the US alone. And you can see the statistics here. And some can say that there's causality versus other reasons why this is happening. Is it because we're able to detect it sooner, or is it because, social media is creating more? There's a lot of thoughts surrounding this. But notwithstanding wanting to understand the why, from a spiritist perspective, we want to learn how to live a life where we can experience healing and be victorious, independent of any statistic, independent of all the external things that are going on around us. We still have this beautiful opportunity, this, like I said in the beginning, this agency over ourselves to choose. It's kind of akin to learning how to build your own house. And that sometimes we may choose the wrong type of wood. So for instance, there was a friend who wanted to build this thing in his backyard, not knowing a whole lot. He chose a specific type of wood. Turns out that termites were really attracted to that type of wood. So he learned his lesson. So next time he built with the other type of wood, lesson learned. Why are we using this as an analogy? Because sometimes throughout our lives, throughout our existences, we build up habits and traits and characteristics that lead us to a point in our lives where we're not at our best. And oftentimes when we reach a point where we're not at our best, sometimes it's to the extreme where it goes into the realm of pathology, or sometimes it's just a little like knock at the proverbial door in our head saying, hey, something's not right. Whenever we are off kilter, our body, our mind, our spirit, our soul, whatever you want to call it, we will feel unwell. But that is just, it's not a punishment. It's just our internal system telling us, hey, pay more attention to me. I need more attention. And we bring these two quotes from the Spirit's book and the Gospel, again, to help us understand a little bit more about this idea of sadness. And you could see in the Gospel, chapter 5, from St. Francois de Genevieve. There you go, but the name is there. The question is asked, do you know why vague sadness sometimes weighs upon hearts and makes your life so bitter? And the spirit's answer, it's your spirit which aspires to happiness and freedom, bound to the body that serves as a prisoner, exhausts itself in vain efforts to escape. However, seeing such efforts are useless, it falls into despondency, and the body, bearing the spirit's influence, sluggishness, dejection, seizes, and you find yourself unhappy. This is just one example where we can literally feel, and this is an unconscious thing, and Joanna does reference this in several of her books. Unconsciously, deep within our subconscious or unconscious, we have some vague memory of perhaps being in a happy colony, let's say like No Solar or some other happy colony. And we read about these stories, right, in No Solar, where when you're preparing to reincarnate and they're like, oh, I really don't want to go back to the earth. Like, I'm doing really great here. Like, I'm really, so we have that vague subconscious memory of that happy place. And here we are in this place. And it's like, ooh, there's a disconnect. And this can happen in not just in that regard, but sometimes even we may have lived on other planets. And we have this vague intuition that maybe in a far off place, we have family somewhere else. I digress. The Spirit's book says, earthly happiness, question 922. Earthly happiness is relative to the position of each person, and what might suffice for the happiness of one would be misfortune for another. Is there nevertheless a common standard of happiness for all? The Spirit's answer, for material existence, it is the possession of all that is necessary. For the moral life, it is a good conscience and faith in the future. And there's so much we could say and talk about, but if you really want to look at a very good example in the book, Torments of Obsession, that's going to be coming out in English hopefully soon. It's in Portuguese and in Spanish. There's a case about Mr. Ambrosio, and he was well prepared. He was like 30 years before he incarnated. He was set to be a medium when he incarnated, and he was born into a family of spiritists. That they weren't poor, but they weren't rich, but they were like in a good position. He had such a loving environment. Like, picture like the perfect situation you want to like choose for yourself, like parents that are happy, that love you, siblings that love you. You have friends, you're going to have friends around you that love you, and you're going to have this loving, spiritist environment, like all the things. But here he comes, and because of his own inclinations and his own old habits from the past, he ends up at the end of his life failing miserably. And he gives an account in the book Torments of Obsession, or they give an account of his rescue. And the scene, we actually had AI, and I didn't bring it because it was very dramatic when I asked AI to create an image. And we're going to talk about this. But one of the things in the treatment of this case of Mr. Ambrose was that oftentimes when we think, from a spiritist perspective, we think about disobsession. We think, oh, a person's unwell. Of course, there's always that spiritual factor. Could be a spirit attached. Usually there is, because we attract, negative things. So of course, when he's brought back, when he was taken from the umbral to the lower zones to No Solar, they cleaned him up. They disconnected an entity that was connected to him. But very curiously, one of the things that they did was they took a well-known medium who was in the spirit realm, Maria Modesto, and other spirit workers, and they did this technique. And the technique, as you're reading the text, at first you might think, oh, they're doing another disobsession meeting, but it's in the spirit realm. And part of it was, but the second half, you see them in the text describe this type of device that, imagine a helmet, okay? Imagine two people with helmets, and the helmets are connected. And Mr. Ambrosio, during this spiritual technique, this negative energy was being sucked out from him, brought over, and brought to the medium. Sounds crazy, right? And as the medium received it, she begins speaking. And the spirit who's giving the account, Manuel Filomena de Miranda, is like, wait, is there a spirit talking? And he's like, and the mentor's like, Dr. Ferrer is like, no. What you are seeing there are the thought patterns that were stuck on Mr. Ambrosio like a broken record. So you heard things like the medium would say, what am I doing? Why am I crazy? Why am I crazy? Or no, I just want to enjoy my life, live life, have fun, spend my money. I don't want to think about, spiritual things, all kinds of disturbing thoughts. Imagine. And they detail this brown fluid coming off the spirit. And all of this in this process. And they explain in the book that all of that energy that was created by Mr. Ambrosio. All of those negative thoughts that he harbored, that he fed, was him. And many of us don't even realize that we do this. And I don't know. We were thinking about this today and recalling our teenage years as a young woman and being very dramatic. The hormonal stages that a woman, a young female can go through due to hormones. And actually reveling in those moments and looking back and seeing that and contemplating and reflecting that there are times in our lives where we unconsciously or unknowingly find some sort of joy in being sad, or we just were as a youngster want the attention or whatever the case may be. But today, whatever your situation may be, this toolbox that comes to you, by the way, via Joanna DeAngelis, if I can talk English today, we've deemed it a toolbox. Because in this book that's not yet in English, Victory Over Depression, she gives clear steps. And really, it's not just in this book. There's other books of hers that are out there that talk about how to be victorious. There's a book that's in English. It's called Plenitude. It's a fantastic book. Leo did a whole series, I believe, of talks he did here at the SSB a couple of years ago. You can find it on the Spiritist Network. And it has great, has similar information as well if you wanted to get to it. But in this particular book, the final chapters, they talk about practical, actionable spiritual medications. And she emphasizes while the body needs medicine, the spirit needs movement, purpose, and change in our vibrational field. So here are the specific things that we're going to dive into. And this is something of the utmost importance for us to start doing immediately, starting today. And this is the discipline of thought surveillance. Thought surveillance. We're not talking about external here. This is all internal here. Surveilling our own personal thoughts and catching ourselves. The moment we begin to have a negative thought, replace it with a positive one. And this is only possible if we're constantly being self-aware. And yes, it is work. In as much as going to the gym when you leave and you feel like, whew, I feel tired, You will feel some fatigue from this in the beginning if you're not used to it, because you're constantly needing to have to go back to restructure the way we think. And Joanna tells us it's critical that we actively monitor our internal monologue, the internal conversations that we have with ourselves. So the exercise is this. Throughout the day, practice mental screening. When a depressive or self-deprecating thought arises, like, and sometimes these are so fast and they happen quickly and we don't even notice. We might say things about ourselves like, oh, and I'm so stupid. Oh, I'm so useless. Oh, gosh, why can't I? No. You just say these things. Sometimes it's out loud, sometimes it's in our mind. And Joanna says for us to stop and consciously replace it with something constructive, a constructive affirmation or a short prayer, whatever works for you, whatever feels more validating or just helps you in the best way, because for everyone it might be different. But replacing that negative monologue is important, and identifying it right away. And why is this important? For multiple reasons. Not only to make sure our vibration stays balanced, allowing us to connect with our spirit guides, our spirit benefactors, but also Joanna talks about these mental parasites or obsessive influences that can latch on to our low frequency thoughts. So imagine this. You're walking along, you have these negative thoughts come out. And you're just thinking them. And here's this spirit over here going, oh, I recognize that frequency. Have you ever walked down the street, or you're in the mall, which who goes? I don't think a lot of people go to the mall anymore, but you're walking down the street or you're in a store and all of a sudden you hear a song. You're like, oh, I love that song. You kind of dance to it a little bit. Have you ever experienced that? Like, oh, that's a really great oldie song. So it's similar to this. We put that vibration out there. We put that frequency out there. And there's someone else that will latch on to us. So to stop this from happening, we want to do this mental hygiene, this thought surveillance. So this is tool number 1. And this requires discipline. The discipline of thought surveillance. And there's a plethora of positive affirmations that are out there. You can, nowadays you can utilize AI, you can just Google it, you can go to Pinterest. There's so much out there. There's so much negative stuff out there, but there's so much positive stuff out there on the web that you can utilize. If you can't think of anything, or even a short prayer, even the back of the Gospel According to Spiritism, there's prayers, short prayers there to help us to refocus, to rebalance ourselves if we can't find the words. Tool number 2, you might think, oh, of course, Kirsten, of course, prayer and fluid therapy. Well, let's talk about that. Joanna says that prayer is presented as a method of mental hygiene rather than just a religious ritual. So this connects also to each tool connects in its own way, and is important that they're together. Prayer, and one could even make a case that positive affirmations, those are sort of a prayer. Positive thoughts, putting it out there, are a form of a prayer. But it is so much more than just some religious ritual, which we don't have rituals in Spiritism. But prayer is nothing more than a conversation with God. So the recommendation is this: establishing a daily routine of elevated thought. This involves sitting in silence for 10 to 15 minutes to synchronize your breathing with a prayer of gratitude or request for inner strength. In the book Plenitude, one of the end chapters, when she talks about complementary and alternative medicine, Joanna talks about utilizing meditation and yoga and acupuncture. These are areas also in which we can throw in our toolbox and we can utilize to assist us in this process. And we shared this recently. We had this experience that in receiving a new type of acupuncture recently, and my acupuncturist, normally when I sit in his office for 10, 20 minutes, whatever he decides I need that day, because it's his decision, based off the energy he's getting. I usually listen to a meditation app, but this one particular, recently he said, no, don't listen to anything. I want you to sit in silence. And I'm like, my first reaction is my ego. I was like, who are you? Tell me what this is also my session I'm paying for. Then I thought, calm down, Mr. Ego, calm down. Like, let's set aside for 1 second and let's be open. Joanna says, be open to new ideas. And I thought, okay, I'm going to be open to this. And man, was it quite an experience to sit there in silence with my own thoughts, which I realized I had it in quite some time, for about 20 minutes. And just meditated on God. And it wasn't even words, it just was an experience. So it's something really important. And when she talks about fluid therapy, she recommends drinking fluidified water, what we call here, the blessed water that has been the subject of prayer or magnetized with positive energy, as a physical, spiritual support for the nervous system. And guess what? You can do this at home. You can have water at your bedside table, or have water when you're doing your God at home, or however it's set up for you in your life. You can have water and just pray over it. And just when you're drinking that water, you're drinking it with intention as a therapeutic tool. And let me add one other thing too. In this tool chest that Joanna actually mentions in the book Plenitude, she talks about chromotherapy. If you're not familiar, I think it was more popular many years ago, at least that's my recollection, but it has to do with light therapy and the color red and blues and different things. And she recommends all those things to try them out as a additive for us in this process of therapeutics. And you might say, Kirsten, these locations, they charge a lot of money for chromotherapy. Guess what? It's free? The sun. The sun is so amazing. We learned through the books of Manuel Filomeno de Miranda, through Givaldo Franco, the sun rays have the ability to dissipate all of the negative energy that is around us. So if you're ever having a bad day, or you're in a funk and it's sunny outside, go outside. Now don't look in the sun. Don't look at the sun with your eyes, okay? I have to say that disclaimer. What I like to do is, because as a spiritist, knowing that there's a connection in the back, I'll tend to sort of turn this way to the sun to allow the sun kind of to give me passes. But you can any which way you want, really, and go outside and be in the sun. Sunlight is really important. But therapeutic prayer and fluid therapy, we can do these things. What was number one? Do you guys remember? Thought surveillance. Number two, therapeutic prayer and fluid therapy. All these things. You don't have to be going through an existential crisis to do these things. You could be feeling, you could say to me, Kirsten, I'm feeling okay, I'm feeling great. Great, awesome. Do this still. Still do it. And this is really interesting when she talks about the therapy of labor. It's a real thing in the arena of clinical depression. And unless you've experienced it personally, it will seem so foreign of an idea. But some people that experience clinical depression, the feeling, the weight of the heaviness in your body is so intense that even getting up out of bed feels like an insurmountable act. But Joanna says, we must make the move. And sidebar, and we're going to talk about this in 1 second, the therapy of movement is really important. I remember learning this from a friend of mine who has been a therapist for a long time, her telling me about movement and yoga. And even if you don't know how to do yoga, and you're like, yoga's not my thing, just moving. Moving is so important. And in this book, they talk about just doing this. Look at this. That simple, easy. When we are in a rut, when we are like, you literally just want to just shake it off, like the Taylor Swift song. Really, that's what it is. And it's an energy that we can, shake from ourselves, shake from our gears in our mind. And this ties into the therapy of labor. It's one of her strongest recommendations to avoid mental idleness. She calls a workshop for shadows. And there's also another saying that idle hands are the devil's playground. To be idle is very dangerous. For us just to sit and have nothing to do, nothing productive to do. Resting, it's important. Joanna talks about rest. Rest and sleep and recuperation are important aspects of our lives. But idleness is something different. If you're feeling in a funk, or if you're feeling like blah, or this new emotion that came out, meh, with the Gen Zers, meh. If you're feeling that way, go and do something productive. My mother, when we were growing up and we would complain about something, if we were feeling like meh or anxious or something, and she would always say, go organize your closet. I'm like, Mom, what are you talking about? Organize my closet? She's like, go and do it. Or go organize your sock drawer or the drawers in your room or whatever it is. And I'm like, Mom, you're so crazy. Like, what? But it would work. It would work because I would be physically doing something. My mind would shift. My thoughts would shift. And I'd get into this. As soon as you organize your closet, like now I want to organize my whole room and I'm going to clean everything. And so mental idleness can be very dangerous. So she tells us, the suggestion is, assign yourself a small, useful tasks, even on days when you have zero motivation. This could be something as simple as organizing a drawer or tending to a plant. Just this past Thursday, we were talking about plants in the Spirits book. Do plants have feelings? Having a plant is great, or plants, plural. Things that we can take care of. So this third tool is the therapy of labor, working. And this is not just about going to work every day, because that we have to do, but on our downtime, finding things that we can do that are productive and assigning yourself. This is where that connects to why having goals in our lives are so important. Because we are constantly working towards something positive. And she tells us this physical movement helps unstick the heavy mental energy of depression. It's those movements, and it's our mind. We're stepping outside of ourselves. And this leads us perfectly to charity as medicine. Self-illumination through charity as medicine. We need to step outside of our ego. Step outside of our own repeated thoughts about, my issues, what's going on with my life. I have this cousin. This is just I'm making this up. I have this cousin. I'm so worried about them, or I'm so worried about my coworker, or this or that of the world, and I'm so concerned. Like, oh my gosh, there's so much to worry about. And you just turn on the TV, and I don't know which news network is worse, because it just seems terrible. Everything seems terrible. And yeah, if you've ever seen that meme, maybe you have, maybe you haven't, and it's a dog, and the dog is sitting in a house, and the house is on fire. And it's something like, and the little description is like, I'm fine, everything is fine. The house is on fire. But he's just sitting there, smiling. I'm fine, everything's fine. But we're not fine. If depression rates have doubled in this country alone. So, Toolbox, 1, the mental hygiene, thought surveillance. 2, who remembers? Prayer and fluidic water. 3, movement, labor, the therapy of labor. It's self-illumination through charity, doing good works. We love that in this book, Victory Over Depression, she talks about, Joanna argues that the exit door from the pain of the self is through the pain of the other. It sounds prettier in Portuguese, but this is how we translate it. But it's really true. When we can step outside of our own pain and help somebody else, we not only feel good for helping that person, but we're stepping outside of that loop, that mental loop that we probably were like stuck in. And they feel good, and they're sending us their good energy, and we're also connecting, which recently we shared about that Harvard study. It's an 80-year-long study that's been ongoing. It's one of the longest of its kind, of happiness study. Is it Harvard or is it Stanford? Don't remember. But they found that connection was one of the biggest signs of happiness for people, like most important. And when we are doing charity, we are connecting with others. Because what happens when we are going through a hard time? Oftentimes we recoil. You'll see animals do this. When animals are sick or before they die, they tend to go and self-isolate. We have that tendency sometimes. We can isolate ourselves. And it's the opposite we should do. When we're not feeling at our best, it's best to get out there. Go for a walk. Call a friend. Schedule acts of charity. So she says to commit to one disinterested act of kindness or service to someone else each week by shifting the focus from my suffering to how can I help? The psychological weight of the ego begins to lift. She says, love is the supreme medication. Service to others is the most efficient antidepressant known to man. Sidebar. She says, never stop taking your medications. If you're on medications for blood pressure, for this or for that, whatever it is, continue following your medical professional's advice, but also use this toolbox. Use it as an additive. Use it as something, as an imperative in our lives. So what's the first one? Thought surveillance. 2, prayer. 3, labor. 4, charity. This could look like you could volunteer, or this could look like you just make an active decision every week. You write down, okay, I'm going to make be very intentional about my behavior when I go out today. I'm going to make sure I'm smiling, I'm kind to others. And if I find, there's a saying, see a need, feel a need. If you see someone needing something, you just go and you do it. And I'll share a personal anecdote. My father passed away, he was 74. So whenever I see old elderly men, I see my father. So many times I see elderly people in general at like the store, the Walmart or the Martins near our house. And my heart just like, oh, Dad, like I always imagine, what would you have looked like? So I see my father in these elderly people, and I always like make a mental note, like see if they need something. I mean, it's something so small as that. And it's amazing when you begin to interact with those who have lived longer than you. And I had the opportunity to experience this with an elderly woman. I was helping her. She had some trouble. And she just starts telling me about her life. Like, it's so fascinating. And you make this connection with someone, and it's super fast. But it's so beneficial to my soul, to her soul, to all of our souls. And as Joanna reminds us, it's a great antidepressant. Love is just the supreme medication of all. Love is the answer. Spiritual study and mental nutrition. Now. Some of you might have said, thus far, I've been good. But what is this about? Well, let's talk about it. Just as the body needs healthy food, the mind needs healthy impressions. So, okay, the exercise is to replace toxic media, violent news, depressing movies, or gossip with edifying reading. She suggests reading a few pages of spiritual philosophy. It could be anything. Gospel according to Spiritism. It could be the Bible. It could be the Tao Te Ching. Anything that is uplifting before bed to set a calm tone for the subconscious during sleep. I'm going to add something here that Joanna doesn't say. To also do this during the day, to be mindful of what we're feeding our minds. And I say this both about whether it's toxic social media or any kind of media, because there's many different types, but also the kind of movies that we like to watch. You got to be careful. We're not saying that you can't go and watch, there's some great and well done movies that are out there recently. I'm not going to name them. But one of them I did watch, and I watched it, and I thought, oh my goodness, it was really not what I thought it was going to be. It was pretty intense. But I tried to look at it from a spiritist perspective, that this particular plot in the story was a perfect example. And if you want to know what the movie is, there, I'll tell you after here, because I'm not going to name it in the talk. It was a perfect example of what happens from a spiritual standpoint when a couple is together and they become invigilant as a couple. Now, we exist as individuals, right? But when we have someone with us on our path, they also can influence us, and vice versa. I digress. Spiritual study and mental nutrition. We've tried to go gluten-free. We try to take out processed sugars. We don't eat red dye. All these great things that are coming out now, like just trying to be more health conscientious. Things that Paul has been talking about for so many years. Like, come on. It's been out there. It's just become more it's only become more popular as of late. I mean, I think it's had its ebbs and flows where it was like really popular, then it's like, and it falls off. Just depends upon what's going on in the world. But this, my friends, healthy food is important, but this mental nutrition is key. Because you can eat all the organic mung beans, are they called mung beans? All the things that are super healthy. But if your mental nutrition is off, you're not going to be well. We won't be well. So she says it's so important that before we sleep, before we disconnect from our physical body to go into the dream realm, that we do not watch anything that could disturb our soul, because our subconscious mind may very well ruminate on that during our hours of sleep and disturb us. So read something edifying, read something uplifting before you go to bed. And folks, nowadays, I'm not going to recommend the phone, even though sometimes I'll do that, because that's where I have my Kindle is on my phone. And I love to read, so I'll go on that. But if you can have a book, that's even better. Just read something uplifting before you sleep. But make an effort during the day too, as well. So these are just five. Just five. Who remembers what the first one is? Thoughts? Surveillance. Yep. 2, prayer and fluidic water. 3, theory of labor, the work, the blessing of work and not being idle. 4, charity, adopting charitable acts. And the 5th one, mental nutrition. 5 tools, free of charge. Anybody at any level can do this. It is a choice to live life intentionally. That is the invitation from Joanna, to live life in an intentional way. So we can be victorious and we can be healthy. And by the way, we can have an illness. We can have a disease and be healthy. And we can be healthy in our physical body, but have a disease. And we just need to read the stories from No Solar and a lot of the Spiritist books to hear the stories of those that lived seemingly normal lives. But behind closed doors told us otherwise. And as a reminder from the Spirit's book, at punishment, we have this idea of punishment. They help us to understand it better. Does the duration of punishment always depend on the Spirit's own will, or are there punishments that are imposed on it for a specific length of time? There are punishments that can be imposed for a specific length of time, but God, who wills only the good for God's creatures, always welcomes its repentance. The Spirit's desire to improve is never fruitless. And Paul the Apostle says, "Truly I say to you, stop comparing eternity in terms of the good, which is the essence of the Creator, with evil, which is the essence of the creature, an approach that ends up creating unjustifiable penalties. Rather, affirm the gradual diminution of punishments and penalties through successive reincarnations, and you will consecrate divine unity through reason and sentiment." And I do want to say something about this. This idea of punishment is very atavistic. We bring it from so many lifetimes. We don't look at life and our suffering as punishments. They are not punishments. This is our rudimentary and very basic understanding when we say this, because that was the general understanding of humankind, especially at that time, especially when the church and brimstone and hellfire and all those things. So they had to be relevant. But in reality, God does not punish us. What happens is that life invites us to ask the question, what is the lesson I meant to learn in this? Not to respond with, oh, God must hate me, God fell asleep, God's punishing me because of this or that reason. No, we have free will. We have the ability to create a beautiful life or not. It is a daily choice. Joy is a choice that we make with intention to experience. Happiness can be fleeting. So, final take-home messages from Joanna. View health conditions as a call for transformation and not a sign of punishment or that we've done something bad and now cause and effect. No, it's a call for transformation. What can I learn from this? What's the lesson? Agency, taking personal responsibility and ethical action. utilizing faith and prayer as part of these tools. And honestly, whatever your faith may be, but whatever connects you to God, that elevates your mind to that creator, and creating that relationship and maintaining that. Healing through service and charity. Cultivating joy and gratitude daily. These are choices we make. Internal dialogues that we have to change and shift to cultivate joy and gratitude. I remember speaking with someone I used to work with, and we'll end here in a second. And she had 3 children. Her oldest at the time was about the age of one of my children now, 7, going on 8. And at the time, this is several years ago, she had gotten really sick. They had done all these tests. Long story short, they found out that she has this incurable form of a brain cancer. And, she was absolutely devastated. And I heard about it through a third party. I reached out to her, see how she is, because I couldn't imagine. I put myself in her position and tried to imagine how I would feel. And it was unfathomable to me to have such a young child and be enduring that, and still having to be a mother to 2 other little ones, and a wife, and work, and do all these things that the world expects of you. And I reached out to her and I said, how are you? And I said, I know that's a stupid question, but how are you? And to this day, it was one of the most impactful conversations, and few and far between in my life. I've had some, though that was one of them. And no, she's not spiritist. She's Christian, but not like just like average. Nobody that's like, overly, just like normal, go to church on holidays kind of person. But she said to me, Kirsten, I swear, had I not fallen to my knees the day that we got the diagnosis for our daughter, she said, I fell to my knees in that hospital room and I just cried out to Jesus. And I said, Jesus, I can't do this without you. I cannot. This is my baby. This is my firstborn. This is my first girl. I cannot endure this without you. And she said, Kirsten, when I said that, she said, I felt this overwhelming presence enter the room like I have never felt in my life. And she said, I felt so supported by this invisible energy. And for her, she said, I felt like God was in the room with me. And throughout the year or so of the treatment of her daughter, she cultivated this relationship with God. And for reasons unknown to me and unknown to her parents, her daughter did die. Her life was cut short. But we know that we live many lifetimes, and her daughter's story is a long story. But the beauty is when we see in people, when they choose to connect to God, to a higher power, especially when you lose a child, it anchors you. And I even was talking to a mutual friend of ours recently. And sometimes it's how I get like, oh my, hey, how's so-and-so? How is she doing? I don't like to bother her because I feel like every time I reach out, it's like it's reigniting like the same trauma of losing your child. So mutual friend, let's call her, I can't think of a name. Mary, thank you. Let's call her Mary. And I said, Mary, how's the person? And she said, Kirsten, I'm astonished by her and her husband. I said, what do you mean? She said, man, Mary and Bob, let's call them. She said, they went through hell and back. They used up all their savings, for the treatment at Johns Hopkins, for all these things. And, and the daughter passed. And she said, they have become in their community and in their church a beacon of light for other parents. And she said, I don't know how they do it, but when you talk to them, Kirsten, she's like, they just have a deeper understanding of life. Like life, I mean, it gives me goosebumps. But she was describing, she's like, Kirsten, they're different people. And I've met her husband and her, have been to their house and all these kind of things. And they're great people. And she said, Kirsten, they are like serene. She's like, there was something about that experience that it brought them closer to their faith, to God. And they're now able to take all of that pain and turn it into help for others in their community. And it's amazing. Do they miss their daughter? 1,000%. Will that pain go away? Probably not. But what it's been replaced with is something much more profound and beautiful. Before it was, we live for our children. And now it's, we live for our children and helping those in the community, because there's a bigger picture here. It's not just about me and my family and my needs. It's about the whole. And remembering, suffering is not punishment. It's simply a tool for spiritual education. Thank you, guys. All right. So with that, do we have any questions or comments? But don't feel like you have to, but Daniel, do we have any online? If not, that's absolutely okay, because
no question.
And that's okay.
So far.
Yeah, and that's okay. I'm actually really glad about that. But yeah, 5 tools we can walk home today and utilize. And I hope that you make a mental note of it and you take it home with you and really be vigilant and mindful in that. So I'll take a moment, I'll stop talking. If anyone has any comments or anything that came to their mind during the talk that they just kind of wanted to comment on, that's okay too. You don't always have to have a question. You know, sometimes there's that pressure of like, someone has to ask a question. You don't. Sometimes you're just taking it in.
You just not tell this to Yasko.
Our dear Yasko.
Any question here? Is now or never. Is now or never.
It's an old song. Well, I think that maybe this was enough. This just was enough to take in. So
if you guys want to have a copy of this PowerPoint, I can email or send later to you guys. Okay.
And as my yogi friends would say, namaste. I think it's namaste is like, I value the beauty in you, and the God recognize the God in me recognizes the God in you. Yes, I love that. I think that's beautiful. So namaste to all of us. Blessings to all of us. To all those who are watching on the web, thank you also for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe to this channel. Just have to make that shout out. But let us transition to our second part, which is our passes, right, Daniel? Yes. So Daniel's going to be putting on some soft music that we can listen to. And we'll ready ourselves for the pass.